There is no smoke without fire, and in today's history, this is not just a metaphor. Fire is terrible in itself. It devours everything in its path, causing irreversible damage. And when it is used to erase evidence and hide crimes, horror only multiplies. It all started with the fact that in an ordinary residential complex, the neighbors noticed black smoke with an unpleasant smell coming from the balcony of the apartment on the second floor. It would seem nothing strange. A young man was cooking a barbecue in his own lodging. The problem was that he did it non-stop, all day and all night, for several days in a row, and it was more like not cooking, but burning something. One of the neighbors was worried that the fire was approaching close to the balcony roof. In the end, he could not stand it and called 911. By the time the firefighters arrived, the fire had subsided, and the tenant from apartment 224 assured them that everything was under control. Another resident of the house directly asked the young man what he was doing on the balcony, and he explained that he was cooking food for a big event. However, the same tenant noticed that the guy from apartment 224 had burned out all the contents of 2 grills and took away the nearest garbage can. Constant burning and stench spreading around the area made the entire residential complex nervous. They were all afraid to find out the alarming truth about what was hiding behind this inescapable flame. And their fears were not groundless, because soon the usual atmosphere of apartment 224 turned into an icy blood place of crime. And before we get started, be kind enough to support my channel. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, and stay active. It will help a lot. I will be very grateful to you for that. Let's get started. The 19-year-old girl returned home for the spring holidays. She was excited about the upcoming week of fun, meetings with friends, and, most importantly, preparing to see her idol Beyoncé live. This evening was supposed to be the best in her life. She made plans, did her hair, chose her outfit, and then suddenly stopped answering calls and messages from best friends, mom, and even professors from college. She didn't show up at classes when the holidays were over. She just disappeared from all radars. When the police began to collect information together, it was too late. What started as a case of a missing person turned into something much more sinister, so unthinkable that even experienced detectives were horrified. They have never encountered anything like this. This is the case of Tynesha Stewart. Tanisha Devona Stewart was born on July 10, 1987. Her childhood cannot be called perfect because her parents divorced when she was very young, and at the age of 6, Tanisha first encountered a tragedy. Her father died of a brain aneurysm. After the divorce, the mother of the girl, Gail, remarried, and Tanisha had a caring stepfather, and then a younger sister was born. So the girl grew up in a full family where her loved ones respected, loved, and valued each other. The family lived in Borders Village, Texas. Tanisha grew up as an ordinary child. She was organized, responsible, studied well at school. In her teenage years, like most children, Tanisha struggled with complexes and self-doubt. She began to quarrel with her stepfather, but as an adult, she coped with her disadvantages and tried to turn them into advantages. She had big dreams and a huge desire to achieve something grandiose in life. Tanisha studied in a high school known for its graduates who reached unprecedented heights in sports, but Stewart did not like sports. Instead, she took on the role of a basketball team manager and led the players outside the sports field. She also loved to sing and performed the national anthem at games. Inspired by popular music and uniting with other girls, she even created her own music group at school. Tanisha managed to combine courses, improve her qualifications in non-class events, and work on a part-time basis. According to the school director, she was one of the most ambitious students. Every day she did something to get closer to her dream. The biggest goal of Tanisha was Texas AANDM University. She wanted to become a construction engineer and had already received several scholarships for a total amount of $40,000 for an excellent graduation from high school. Her aspirations and determination to achieve goals were phenomenal, and all the more devastating, it seems, what happened to her. Tanisha's first real boyfriend was Curtis, a handsome, popular middle school boy in love with one and only. All his attention was focused on Stewart. He opened the door for her, held her hand, treated her as if she were the most important person on earth. She liked it. They were a couple at all school events, as well as on graduation night. Many envied the girl and dreamed of being in her place. Everyone knows that first love is rarely the last. It is passionate, but very unpredictable. Tanisha and Curtis either stopped their relationship or resumed it. At the same time, the young man always stayed close, loved, respected, and wanted the best for his girlfriend. And then, everything fell apart. At the third year of college, Tanisha worked a part-time job in a pizzeria where the delivery driver was Timothy Shepard. At the first meeting, a spark seemed to fly between them. The girl finally broke up with Curtis and began dating Timothy. And it was not just a random school romance. Now everything was serious. There was one thing that no one knew about for a long time. Timothy was 8 years older than Tanisha. He was 24, and she was only 16. The girl did not tell anyone about it, afraid that her mother and stepfather would not approve of their romance. Being in ignorance, Tanisha's family immediately fell in love with Timothy. Mother, stepfather, and sister believed that sooner or later everything would end with a wedding. Shepard was charming. He not only met Tanisha, he became part of the Stewart family. He was present at all family events, hung out with her younger sister, until, in the end, the young people began to live together. When Tanisha graduated from high school in 2006 and entered Texas AANDM University in the fall, she and Timothy decided to continue their relationship at a distance. But it didn't last long. Stewart didn't have time to leave, and Timothy's ex-girlfriend was drawn on the horizon, and they met. Tanisha experienced betrayal for the first time, but despite the fact that she was morally depressed, she continued to move forward, regardless of who was next to her. A completely different world opened up for the girl at the university. She felt truly independent, new acquaintances, new experiences, new opportunities. Timothy enjoyed his relationship with his ex-girlfriend for a short time, and soon realized that he had made a mistake. He missed Tanisha and wanted to get her back. The guy left everything and rushed to college. Of course, the girl was definitely surprised. They talked to Timothy and realized that they were still experiencing tender feelings for each other. The couple tried to build a relationship at a distance again. The reality was that over time, Tanisha began to change and grow emotionally. Now she no longer saw the point of clinging to the past. It was at this time that the girl met Mark, a classmate. Mark was her peer. Their thoughts and desires coincided. And although a part of her heart still belonged to Timothy Shepard, the student understood that their romance had come to an end. About 2 years later, Tanisha made a choice. She decided to end it forever and began to spend time with Mark. Young people were not in a hurry. At first, there was just friendship and a slight flirtation between them. They just enjoyed each other's company. All this time, she also continued to communicate with Timothy, wishing to remain on good terms with him. In her imagination, love and friendship could exist together. By March 2007, Tanisha was already used to student life. The exciting future was ahead of her. And most importantly, the girl was happy. She counted the days until the spring holidays, looking forward to reuniting with friends from her hometown and the opportunity to go to the performance of her idol, Beyoncé. The concert was to take place on March 15th in Houston. Then Tanisha planned to go to the island of South Padre and only then return to the campus. On March 14th, 2007, the girls spent the evening preparing for tomorrow's event. Together with former classmates, they made hairstyles for each other, laughed until they fell, and remembered school stories. Stewart was going to spend the night at her friend Lois's apartment. In the evening, she called her mother and asked for permission to take a car for tomorrow's concert. The woman agreed. She was happy for her daughter. The only thing her mother didn't know yet was that it would be their last conversation, because Tanisha never showed up at the concert. She disappeared from her friend's apartment and stopped answering calls. Lois realized that her friend was in trouble because Tanisha would never just miss Beyoncé's concert. She planned it in advance. When Stewart did not appear the next morning, on March 16th, her friends got worried. Lois contacted Gail, Tanisha's mother, and she said that she had not heard anything from her daughter since Wednesday evening. Panic grew. Stewart's family realized that something serious had happened because Tanisha would never make them worry for no reason. She would definitely let them know about herself. Gail called all her daughter's friends and her former classmates, but no one heard anything about Tanisha. Then, just in case, her mother dialed the number of her ex-boyfriend Timothy Shepard, hoping that he was talking to her daughter and was aware of her plans. The guy admitted that he talked to Tynesha on Thursday night, but after that, he did not see her. It was the night before the concert, so Timothy was probably the last person who contacted the missing girl. Gail could not wait any longer. She began her own investigation. She went straight to Timothy to talk to him face to face and collect additional information. Although the whole family loved Shepard when he met Tanisha, now the mother treated him carefully. She herself could not explain the cause of these changes. It was some kind of inner feeling, and now that her daughter was gone, this feeling had intensified. Timothy calmly explained to Gail that he met Tanisha on the night of March 14th, after her party with her friends. He drove up to her apartment in Lois's place. Ex-lovers went to him, but then at 3 o'clock in the morning, the girls called. Timothy immediately realized that this was her new boyfriend and, in a fit of jealousy, questioned why he was calling her at such a time. Tanisha refused to discuss her relationship with Mark and just left. It was about 4 or 5 in the morning, so she left on foot alone in the middle of the night. On Monday, March 19th, Gail filled out an official statement on the disappearance of a person. She gave the officers a full description of her daughter. Tynesha Stewart, 19 years old, height 156 centimeters, weighed about 54 kilograms, black hair, brown eyes. Of the special features, tattoos on the right thigh and back. The last time she was seen by Lois in a white shirt and rainbow-colored pajamas. Gail expected the police to start acting right away, but instead, they just waved it off. According to the officer, an adult girl on spring holidays could just be detained somewhere. The mother was sent home, advised to be patient and call after the weekend, but Gail knew perfectly well that her daughter was not the person who needed free space. She had to be at the concert, and then she had to return to classes at the college. If Tanisha was going to go somewhere, she would just let her parents know. Days went by, and nothing happened. There were no answers. There was nothing left for the family but to take matters into their own hands. They pasted up leaflets, walked around the streets of the city and forest ranges, called hospitals and morgues, talked to friends and classmates of Tanisha, with everyone who could see her. Close relatives of the missing girl desperately tried to find at least some clue about her whereabouts. When classes started at the university, Tanisha was still listed as missing. Even the teachers were surprised that the student did not come to study and tried to reach her. The fears in the family grew to the limit, not receiving any help from the police and not knowing what else to do. They organized a meeting in the Lutheran church to draw the attention of the community to the disappearance of Tanisha. This definitely helped. The sheriff's assistant, who worked in the missing persons department, was finally interested in this case. After learning that the girl was last seen in the apartment of Timothy Shepard, the police went to the apartment complex. However, no one opened the door. Then the officers contacted the manager of the apartment complex, who reported that 2 days earlier, a fire had been recorded in Shepard's apartment. Another neighbor noted that he heard shots in the forest adjacent to the complex, which prompted the police to call a canine unit and search the wooded area. Almost immediately, the dogs found an unmistakable smell of decay a few dozen meters from the apartment complex, and the closer they came, the stronger the stench became. In fact, it turned out that the smell came from a dead animal. For a moment, there was a sense of relief, but then it was replaced by fear because Tanisha was still missing. At that moment, the sheriff's deputy decided to find out what kind of fire happened in Shepard's apartment. It turned out that the neighbors were worried because thick black smoke was coming from the balcony of apartment number 224 for several hours in a row. And then the barbecue grill lit up completely. Residents called firefighters, but Shepard refused to let them in, explaining that he was just cooking meat on his balcony right on several grills next to each other, and there was no danger. Indeed, when the firefighters arrived at the scene, there was no fire or smoke. Somehow, convincing the young man that they needed to make sure that there was no fire, the firefighters inspected the apartment. In the bathroom, they found a pile of melted ice and pieces of meat. They had no idea what kind of meat it was. They were called there because of the fire. Guarding the bathroom, whatever it is not a crime, and frying meat on a grill in your own house is also not prohibited. The firefighters left, and Timothy returned to his business, at least until the sheriff's assistant called him and summoned him to the police station for interrogation. Shepard told the detectives the same story that he had told her mother in secret before. He was completely calm and repeated that the girl had left his apartment when they argued over the night call of her boyfriend. She slammed the door and left on foot without any explanation. Timothy Shepard was released. The Stewart family unsuccessfully prayed for the safe return of Tanisha. They never received any answers from the police and felt that no one cared about their daughter and sister. The community was outraged by the lack of clear actions by the authorities. They believed that the media often gave priority to missing white girls and did not move at all when it came to black people. The sister and cousin of Tynesha were associated with the public activist Quennell X, known for his work in the black community and the reform of the justice system. He became the voice of the families who were ignored by the authorities. He had a reputation as a person who was not a fan of law enforcement agencies. Quennell promised to do everything possible to reveal the truth, and after his intervention, the police really began to take the case more seriously. Detectives found out that at the time of the disappearance, Tanisha was in a relationship with a young man named Mark and decided to talk to the young man. At first, Mark did not respond to any attempts by the police to contact him, and then he called back himself. In the end, he was interrogated, and he said that on March 17th, he went to the island of South Padre. The police found it strange that the guy left the city after the disappearance of Tanisha, but Mark explained that he tried to contact her, but Stewart did not answer. And when he was already in South Padre, he heard about her disappearance. The last person to see Tanisha alive was her ex-boyfriend, Timothy Shepard. It was on him that the detectives decided to focus their attention. They studied the past of the guy and talked to his neighbors. Timothy came from a decent family with a good reputation in society. His mother worked as a pharmacist. The biological father of the boy died when Timothy was only 2 months old, so he was raised by his stepfather. The Shepard family regularly visited the Missionary Baptist Church, where the stepfather served as a deacon and the mother sang in the choir. Timothy also had a younger sister who studied law at the University of Houston. The Shepards were a respected and friendly family. Timothy himself was the father of a 4-year-old daughter over whom he received full custody. He was described as a quiet, restrained, and well-mannered young man, as well as a devoted father who sincerely cared for his child. After graduating from high school, Timothy entered the university, but did not receive an official degree. At first glance, he led a relatively normal life, but detectives found out that the boy had some problems with the law in the past. This was due to the storage of banned substances. Although this was before the disappearance of Tynesha Stewart, the investigators decided to visit Shepard's apartment because before that, at the interrogation, he had already given written consent to the authorities to conduct a search in his house. As soon as the detectives entered, they immediately noticed 2 things: the smell of a mixture of bleach, ammonia, and something else, which they could not accurately determine. And then they smelled fresh paint. It seems that the owner was in a hurry to do repairs in the kitchen. The cabinets, walls, door frames, even the inner part of the tub under the sink were covered with white paint. But all this was done carelessly, in a hurry. Traces of bleach were visible on the carpet. This was a clear sign that the guy was trying to hide something. There was a dirty mop and a package of latex gloves. The sink and drain were carefully washed, as well as the bathroom itself. All this looked more than suspicious. However, several traces of blood were found. The use of luminol confirmed the worst suspicions of the investigators. The entire bathroom was blue. Spots and splashes were everywhere. The floor, walls, shower, toilet seat, tank, The entire bathroom was covered with blood. The investigators called experts who took DNA samples and collected possible evidence. Since it was necessary to wait for a report on the collected material, the detectives returned to inspect the area and talk to potential witnesses. In a fire report, 911 calls from the residents of the apartment complex arrived 3 days before Tanisha's mother officially announced her disappearance. One neighbor of Shepard said she smelled something like burnt tires. The flame was so high that she was afraid for the safety of her home. Another neighbor, who often played video games with Timothy, said that they used to fry meat often. He even left his grill in a friend's apartment. But when Shepard arranged a barbecue this time, he didn't even invite a friend to visit. Other residents heard a knock, the sound of running water, and the constant buzzing of a waste shredder in apartment number 224. Little by little, the details began to emerge in a very alarming picture. Timothy looked more and more like a suspect. Let's go back to the social activist Quennell X. As it turned out, not only Tynesha's relatives, but also Shepard's cousin, who asked him to help protect Timothy from police brutality, were connected to him. Quennell X, communicating with Tynesha's relatives and Timothy's relatives, learned a lot new about the relationship of the young people. It all started great. Two in love, tender feelings, and serious plans for the future. But soon the relationship became unstable. Constant arguments and scandals began. After leaving for college, Tanisha admitted to her family that she was afraid of Timothy. Shepard was so used to controlling everything that his jealousy sometimes went beyond the limits of what was allowed. The guy called her constantly, wanting to know where she was and who she was spending the evening with. Even when they broke up, Timothy continued to call her neighbors in the room and find out what Tanisha was doing in her free time. And when they refused to talk to him, he left them angry messages. The girl did not tell her loved ones a lot, not wanting to make them nervous and worried about her. But a friend of Stewart admitted that once Timothy held her by the neck, threatening to strangle her and then kill her if she left him. And when she refused the ring on Valentine's Day that he wanted to give her, Timothy allegedly jokingly said that one day he would kill her, fry her on a grill, and feed her to dogs. It all happened about 1.5 years ago. Since then, everything had calmed down a bit, and Shepard had stopped bothering her until February 2007. About a month before the spring holidays, he called again. Tanisha was worried that he would not let her rest in peace, and even thought about not returning to the city. But she so wanted to see her friends and loved ones that she tried to talk calmly and friendly with Timothy so as not to cause aggression toward her. The truth was that Tanisha still loved him, but knew that they had no future. That is why she agreed to meet him at night on the eve of her disappearance. Quennell X, wanting to hear Timothy's version of the events, called him and agreed to meet. When the public activist arrived at Shepard's apartment, Timothy was very nervous. His hands were shaking uncontrollably, his gaze was sweeping from side to side, and the young man himself was noticeably depressed. In the house, Quennell noticed a large number of luminol traces in the bathroom, which the forensic researchers had left. He looked at Timothy and asked if he knew what really happened to Tanisha. Shepard lowered his head and then admitted that the girl was not alive. He himself was very afraid of death and did not want to die. The public defender urged Shepard to think about the Stewart family, which desperately needed an answer, and asked not to prolong their suffering. Timothy brought Quennell X to a garbage container behind an apartment building located about 5 kilometers from his complex. The behavior of the young man immediately changed. He began to breathe heavily. His hands twitched nervously. Timothy did not even look at the garbage can, but when the container was opened, it was completely empty. By that time, all of its contents had already been sent to the landfill. Although the remains of Tynesha Stewart were never found, Shepard was arrested and charged with murder. The family of the deceased had one unbearable pain replaced by another. Now they knew that Tanisha was not alive, but they did not even have the opportunity to say goodbye to her and bury her in a human way. In the police station, Timothy took advantage of his right to a lawyer, but then changed his mind. When he was left alone in the interrogation room, he made a decision that shocked everyone. He wanted to confess to everything. According to Shepard, that night they quarreled with Tanisha because of her new boyfriend, Mark. The girl did not like that Timothy intervened in her life again. She grabbed a knife that happened to be on the table and swung, cutting his fingers. Shepard showed the officers a small scratch on his arm and continued the story. At first, he was afraid that Stewart would kill him, but then he got angry and threw himself at her. Timothy seemed to have snapped when he grabbed the neck of the ex-girlfriend with his right hand, and with his other hand, he tried to grab the knife. He clenched her neck until the weapon fell out of Tanisha's hand, and she herself collapsed and fell to the floor. Instead of calling 911, he decided to cover his tracks because he panicked and thought that no one would believe his version of events. Knowing that the police would look for the girl and find out what happened to her, Shepard placed her body in a large plastic container for storage and threw it into the garbage can that he later showed to Quennell X. When the detectives left the room, Timothy tried to kill himself. He put a belt around his neck and hooked it to the door handle. Naturally, his attempt was not successful. Meanwhile, the police were deciding what next step to take in the search for the body. The dump took up a giant territory. Several dozen tons of garbage were sent there every day. The searches could take months and cost a huge amount. At the same time, the detectives were not even sure if they would ever find Tanisha's remains. However, the real horror was different. It was far from the whole story because Timothy missed significant details. He would never have confessed if the investigators themselves had not gotten to the bottom of it. The police immediately believed that Shepard did not tell the whole truth because they returned to his apartment and searched the balcony again carefully. What the experts found was truly terrifying. They checked the drain in the bathroom and in the kitchen, the gap between the halves on the balcony and the trash can. As a result, a bunch of burnt hair, tiny fragments of charred bones, fragments of teeth, and burnt skin were found. All this was sent for DNA testing, and now all that remained was to wait for the results. Apparently, after the murder, Timothy put Tanisha's body in the bathroom, cut it into several pieces, and then tried to get rid of the evidence. He burned some of the remains on the grill and then threw the ashes into the garbage. He destroyed other body fragments using a kitchen waste shredder. He scattered everything else in different garbage containers. Shepard was busy destroying the body of his former girlfriend for 2 or 3 days. He took advantage of the fact that he had 2 barbecue grills on the balcony and decided that the burnt bones would be more difficult to identify or associate with him. Looking back, the pieces of meat lying in the bathtub in a pile of ice, found by firefighters when inspecting the apartment, were nothing more than parts of Tanisha's body. Of course, at that moment, the rescuer could not even imagine that there were human remains in front of him. Meanwhile, a DNA test showed that the body fragments really belonged to 19-year-old Tynesha Stewart. Timothy Shepard was held in prison for $250,000 bail. The girl's mother, having learned that this man had done this to her daughter, wanted him to be tried to the full extent of the law. The prosecutor was also determined to achieve Shepard's conviction, but the whole case against Timothy almost fell apart because of his lawyer. Chip Lewis, a very successful lawyer known for his high-profile cases, including the infamous story where the criminal first took a life and then dismembered his neighbor. At that time, Lewis managed to succeed, proving that dismemberment is not equivalent to murder. Now Lewis was going to dispute every piece of evidence against Shepard that the prosecution team had. He focused on the fact that Timothy's confession was coerced. The lawyer argued that it was allegedly obtained under duress and that the detectives did not follow legal procedures. If the lawyer had been able to defend his position, then all the evidence found in apartment 224 would not have been possible to present in court. This would have made it much more difficult to issue an indictment. Fortunately, the prosecutor was able to convince the judge, and he rejected the request of the defense team. The trial of 28-year-old Timothy Wayne Shepard began on September 29, 2008, when the prosecutor laid out the details of the crime to the public present at the hearings. and the Tynesha family had to experience terrible moments, imagining in detail what was done to their daughter and sister. The defense team focused on the fact that Timothy strangled the girl as a result of self-defense, and what happened to her body was no longer so important. The lawyer tried to minimize the effect of the barbaric and inhuman actions of his client, and about the shards of a tooth found in Shepard's apartment, he stated that people sometimes lose their teeth, assuming that Tanisha accidentally dropped it into the sink before her death. It sounded wild, but this is the work of a lawyer. In response to such a statement, the prosecutor made a clarification that Timothy was afraid that he would be accused on the basis of a dental record, so he used pliers to pull out Tanisha's teeth. This is exactly what the expertise confirmed. As a witness, the public activist, Quenelle X, also spoke. He promised the family of the deceased girl to seek justice and kept his word, giving evidence for everything he saw and heard. After 4 days of discussion, the jury recognized Timothy Shepard guilty of murdering his ex-girlfriend. The family and friends of Tanisha broke down, and Timothy sat indifferent and emotionless, like a monster, which, in principle, he was. When it came to the verdict, Shepard decided to make a statement. He wanted to get sympathy from the court. Although the lawyer dissuaded him from an unthinkable step, Timothy thought he could convince everyone that he did not deserve such a severe punishment. He would like to return home to his ordinary life and not waste the best years of his life behind bars. Naturally, his speech did not even cause pity. Timothy Shepard was sentenced to 99 years in prison and a maximum possible fine of $10,000. It would seem that justice had triumphed. Tanisha's mother blamed herself for everything. She did not see this evil in Shepard, which was hidden inside. She let this evil into her house and allowed it to be with her daughter, having no idea what this person was capable of. After the death of her daughter, Gail strives to ensure that other women do not suffer at the hands of their ex-partners. She shares Tynesha's story and holds discussions about healthy relationships. Gail believes that interfering in the affairs of her child is not a crime, but on the contrary, the duty of every parent who values the well-being of their daughter or son. If you have finished watching, you are a real fan of true crime. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the bell notifications, and put the like. See you in the next video.